Curious about which meals were served at 30,000 feet the year you were born? Some meals soared above the clouds while others took a nosedive. I bet you remember them all. Let's fly back in time. Let's start with the golden age of air travel, the early 1960s. If you were born between 1963 and 1966, you missed out on the heyday of jet travel, but your parents probably enjoyed a taste of luxury in the sky. Imagine this: fine china, crystal glasses, and a menu curated by a French chef. Yes, folks, airplane food was once considered a gourmet experience. The post-war era was a time of economic boom and increased leisure travel. As air travel became more accessible to the middle class, airlines sought to differentiate themselves by offering a superior in-flight dining experience. What's not to love about a five-star meal in the air? French cuisine, with its reputation for elegance and sophistication, was the perfect fit. Passengers could expect dishes like delicate mousseline de sole, tender filet mignon, and rich sauces. Now that sounds like a luxury compared to the omelets we get in the economy today. Back in the 60s, the focus was on quality ingredients and classic French techniques. It was a time when flying was synonymous with luxury, and the dining experience was a crucial part of that. It was the era of white tablecloths and impeccable service. But let's be honest, who needs all that fancy stuff when you can have a good old-fashioned burger? While the French culinary influence dominated the skies, it's important to remember that not everyone was a fan of haute cuisine at 30,000 feet. Yeah, some of us here have a light stomach that becomes super delicate during those hefty travel days. The late 60s brought a new era of experimentation to airline food. It was all about themes. One flight, you could be dining in Italy. The next, you were transported to the heart of Mexico. Remember those tiny plastic sombreros and maracas? Yeah, that was a thing. The swinging 60s was a decade of social change, and the airline industry was no exception. As air travel became more accessible, airlines began to focus on creating a more vibrant and exciting passenger experience. Themed dining was a way to add a touch of fun and adventure to the journey. Think spaghetti and meatballs served in a red and white checkered bowl, or tacos and enchiladas with a side of guacamole. It's like your foreign vacation started before you even landed in the land. Craving Italian? Your airlines had you covered. One of the best themed cuisines was served by Trans World Airlines. Yeah, the storied and glamorous airline preferred by celebrities and the international jet set. The menu featured offerings from the serving wench and the groaning table. Passengers could dine on deviled lobster, beef brisket with horseradish sauce, broiled lamb chops, or Dover sole, all washed down with glasses of ale or beer. To top off this Epicurean meal, you could enjoy a jigger of drambuie, the Scotch and honey blend created for Bonnie Prince Charlie in the 18th century. While the food might not have been authentic, it was certainly adventurous. And let's not forget the psychedelic color schemes of the airline interiors. It was a wild time to be a passenger. The 70s were a decade of excess, and airline food was no exception. Think rich, creamy sauces, lots of cheese, and a heavy emphasis on meat. We're talking about beef stroganoff, chicken Kiev, and other calorie-packed delights. It was a time when health-conscious eating was about as popular as disco pants, but hey, at least the food was filling. According to Reader's Digest, United Airlines created the first kitchen devoted to developing airline cuisine that took into account the changes in taste buds and sense of smell at high altitudes. United hired French chef Raymond Oliver in 1973 to improve its passenger meals, and he figured out that anything tasted good at 30,000 feet when it's drenched in butter, cream, or salt. Former Pan Am stewardess Anne Sweeney recalled that she heated vegetables and meat in the galley, and there was always a rich sauce. As airlines grew more competitive, high-end items would appear on many of their menus. These included dishes such as seafood Newburg, boeuf bourguignon, pheasant in sour cream, and lobster à l'américaine. The 70s was a time of economic growth and a growing middle class. This increased disposable income led to a desire for indulgence and luxury. Airline food reflected this trend with rich, decadent dishes that were designed to impress. The focus was on comfort food with a gourmet twist. These dishes were often served with a side of buttery mashed potatoes or a generous helping of pasta. While the food might have been delicious, it wasn't exactly healthy. The emphasis on rich sauces and heavy cream meant that these meals were high in calories and fat. But for many passengers, indulging in a hearty meal was part of the flying experience. If you're a health freak, you would have survived the 70s because they had some healthy options like salads and seafood on board too, as long as you didn't pair them with the fatty sauces. And then there was 1977, the year Star Wars took the world by storm, and a policy enacted by Southwest Airlines was the beginning of the end of gourmet meals. The year airplane food took a drastic turn. Peanuts. Everywhere. It was the year of the peanut. Whether you loved them or hated them, there was no escaping them. And let's be honest, it was probably a cheaper option for the airlines. The 1970s were a decade of economic challenges, including rising fuel costs. Airlines were looking for ways to cut costs without sacrificing passenger satisfaction too much. Enter the peanut. Cheap, versatile, and with a long shelf life, peanuts were the perfect solution. Airlines began offering peanuts as a complimentary snack to passengers. It was a simple, no-frills approach to in-flight dining. While some passengers were disappointed with the lack of substantial food, others welcomed the change. Peanuts were a familiar and comforting snack, and they helped to fill the void left by the decline of full meals. Consequently, more airlines stayed competitive by cutting out the caviar and passing out baskets of peanuts instead, which stayed on Southwest's menu until 2018, when peanut allergies forced the airline to switch to other snacks. Of course, not everyone was a fan of peanuts. Allergies were becoming a more recognized issue, and some passengers had dietary restrictions. However, for the most part, peanuts were a successful cost-cutting measure for airlines. And let's face it, they're not half bad when you're bored and stuck in a metal tube at 30,000 feet. During the late 1970s and early 1980s, the golden age of airline food was coming to an end. According to Travel Plus Leisure, the division between first class and economy didn't exist until the 1970s. Before then, most airlines offered the same meals to all passengers, and food was served off trolleys onto china plates. To keep up with the demand for air travel, airlines began selling lower-priced tickets, thus creating economy. And that's on social stratification. As the cost of fuel soared, so did the price of a plane ticket. To cut costs, airlines started to downsize their meals. Enter the era of the economy meal. Think tiny sandwiches, rubbery chicken, and questionable side salads. It was the beginning of the end for gourmet dining in the sky. From 1978 to 1982, airplane food started changing shape. From luxurious meals to economy meals, let's just say we came a long way, or flew a long way. The late 1970s marked a turning point for the airline industry. Deregulation led to increased competition, which forced airlines to find ways to reduce costs. With the rise of budget travel, airlines began to focus on catering to the needs of the mass market. As a result, the quality of in-flight meals declined. The focus shifted from gourmet dining to providing basic sustenance, smaller portions, less variety, low quality, the whole shebang. The days of fine china and silver cutlery were over. Instead, passengers were served their meals on plastic trays. Now, it was quite the downfall going from French cuisine to biscuits and curry, but it was still a welcome addition to the flying experience. For many passengers, the opportunity to eat a hot meal at 30,000 feet was a luxury in itself. And let's face it, it was better than surviving on peanuts and pretzels. If you were born between 1983 and 1987, you might remember a time when the height of airline luxury was a single olive on a plastic tray. Yes, you heard that right. One olive. It was a dark time for airplane food. Okay, before you start raising eyebrows, no, this era wasn't about serving a single olive on a tray, because that's just downright bizarre. Instead, airlines decided to cut costs by removing a single olive from each plastic tray on the Big Bird. Where did that come from? Well, American Airlines was in murky financial waters, and the airline's president, Robert Crandall, was scouring onboard flight service for ways to cut back. He landed on the idea of removing a single olive from every salad plate, which would save the airline $40,000 annually. And guess what? It worked. No one noticed that the poor olive was gone, but this was the start of airlines taking items off the menu without anyone noticing. Okay, let's take a quick detour to the world of luxury. If you were born between 1988 and 1990, consider yourself royalty, because if you were lucky enough to fly on the Concorde, you were in for a treat. Forget about economy meals. This was fine dining at 35,000 feet. Caviar, champagne, and a menu that would rival a Michelin-starred restaurant. But let's be real. Most of us were stuck in coach. While the rest of the airline industry was struggling to survive, the Concorde offered a glimpse into the future of air travel. This supersonic jet was a symbol of luxury and exclusivity. Passengers who could afford the exorbitant ticket price were treated to an unparalleled level of service. The Concorde's in-flight dining experience was legendary. The menu was carefully curated by world-renowned chefs, and the presentation was impeccable. Passengers could enjoy a multi-course meal with fine wines and champagne. It was a far cry from the economy meals being served on other airlines. But here's the crazy part, of course. All this luxury came at a high cost. According to Condé Nast Traveler, a transatlantic ticket price set you back about $12,000, and the hefty airfare gained you entrance to an exclusive club frequented by the likes of Sting, Bruce Springsteen, and flocks of supermodels. There's no denying that it was heavy on the wallet, which means the Concorde was a commercial failure, and it was retired in 2003. For most people, the experience of flying on this iconic aircraft remains a dream. The 90s brought about a new era of airline branding. Airlines started to focus on creating a friendly atmosphere, and what better way to show passengers you care than by offering them a decent meal? While it wasn't gourmet, it was definitely an improvement over the previous decade. Think chicken or pasta, with a side of questionable vegetables. It was edible at least. The early 90s marked a shift in the airline industry's focus. With increased competition, airlines realized the importance of customer satisfaction. To create a more positive passenger experience, many airlines introduced new branding campaigns and marketing strategies. In 1991, United Airlines aimed at getting more families to travel by teaming up with McDonald's to create a version of the Happy Meal. What screams friendly more than a side of fries and a good old cheeseburger? Oh, and how can we forget the sacred Happy Meal toy? Advertisements for the Friendly Skies meal called back to the famous 1965 slogan, "Fly the Friendly Skies." The meal included a cheeseburger, cookies, and a toy, although later carrot sticks, fruit, and non-fat milk were added. All good things come to an end, and so did this Happy Meal in the sky. The mid-90s brought us one of the most iconic airplane food items of all time, the BBQ Chicken Leg. Airline food in the 1990s is best remembered as getting less for more money. Long gone were the days when you might be served pheasant in sour cream or a roasted half chicken. You still might get a little better food in first class or business class, but in the economy, you were lucky if you got a size-challenged chicken leg lacquered in overly sweet barbecue sauce, a dinner roll, and a puny portion of the same dessert you'd find in a TV dinner. But let's be honest, no one complained. It was a staple of every in-flight meal. Whether it was dry, rubbery, or somehow both, it was a constant presence. And let's not forget the questionable side of mashed potatoes. It was a simple, inexpensive meal that could be mass-produced and served to thousands of passengers every day. While it may not have been the most exciting food option, it was reliable and familiar. The BBQ chicken leg became a cultural touchstone, a subject of jokes and memes. Of course, not every airline served BBQ chicken legs. Some offered different protein options, such as grilled salmon or pasta, so you still had your fair share of options. But hey, who says no to a BBQ chicken leg? Unless you're vegan, no judgment here. Now, the events of September 11th changed the world, and the airline industry was hit hard. Security measures tightened and costs rose. Years from 1999 to 2001 saw some dark days. As a result, airline food took another hit. Meals became smaller, less frequent, and generally less appealing. It was a tough time for passengers and airlines alike. whereas first class and business class still got some perks, like free-flowing booze, Michelin-worthy meals, and a gourmet dessert tray. Economy passengers were charged for anything they put in their mouths. According to the Los Angeles Times, airport terminal food was far more enticing than the high-salt, high-fat stuff the airlines served. In 2000, there were 60 restaurants and food concessions in all the terminals at Los Angeles International Airport, where you could also find much healthier options. But if you missed out on the concessions, you had a fruit cup, hardtack roll, and some greens waiting for you in the Big Bird. Sounds like that meal came straight out of the nightmares of every 5-year-old out there. By the early 2000s, the concept of a full meal on a flight had become a distant memory. Airlines were now focusing on snacks and prepackaged meals. It was the era of the bag of pretzels and the mini wrap. While convenient, it was definitely a step down from the glory days of airline cuisine. The early 2000s were a time of economic uncertainty and rising fuel costs. Airlines were under pressure to reduce expenses, and in-flight dining was an easy target for cost-cutting measures. An airline couldn't be budget-conscious about certain essential costs, like equipment and fuel, but food was definitely on the chopping block. The few meals that were served in first class and business class now came with plastic cutlery, and the food served was wrapped and packaged as a security measure. As usual, economy passengers got the fuzzy end of the lollipop. The focus shifted from providing full meals to offering a limited selection of snacks and beverages. Popular snack items included pretzels, peanuts, cookies, and crackers. Prepackaged sandwiches and salads were also available for purchase. These options were generally lower in cost and easier to prepare than hot meals. It was a practical approach to in-flight dining, but it also marked a decline in the overall passenger experience. Gone were the days of hot meals and proper silverware. The final stop on our journey takes us to the late 2000s. The recession of 2008 dramatically impacted the airline industry. If you wanted anything more than a bag of chips, you were going to have to pay for it. Airlines started charging for everything from water to sandwiches. It was a controversial move, but it became the new normal. The late 2000s marked a significant shift in the airline industry's business model. With rising fuel costs and economic uncertainty, many airlines went bankrupt. One of the most controversial strategies was the introduction of fees for previously complimentary services, including food and beverages. Passengers were now faced with the choice of paying for a basic sandwich or surviving on the complimentary snacks. The days of free meals were officially over. And that, my friends, is the story of how airplane food went from gourmet to gouging. So, do any of these airline meals make you want to go back in time? If so, like this video, click subscribe, and stay tuned for more nostalgia trips.